right. Hello. Welcome to the Artificially Intelligent podcast, where a white comedian, that's me in Iowa, Nathan Timmel, and a black musician in Philadelphia, that's Barrett Antar Goodwin right there,
Indeed.
who have been pretty much at this point lifelong friends,
Yeah,
which is
we're
better.
lifers.
Well, it's better when you say it when you're like 5 years old, like we're lifelong friends because you're only 5, but we're fucking grandparents almost.
Yeah.
And we have a guest today.
Yes, we do.
Guest, Camryn Hanson, correct?
Correct.
Correct. And Camryn is here to discuss, will be the first transgender guest we've had, and wanted to talk about her journey. And just, I guess, yeah, that would be it. Where to jump in? I have two questions, and I'm not sure if one is leading or if one is too basic. I guess I'll go with the leading one, because it's not starting at the beginning. I don't want to start at the beginning. We can work back to that.
Right.
I do not know very many transgender people. I would say 5 when I sat down and counted. And what I discovered is that the ones that were older, Generation X, later end, were much more comfortable about their decision than the few younger ones I knew, who were very angry and militant and, God damn it, this is who I am. And I'm like, I didn't say you weren't, but do you have any thoughts on that? Did you find that, I mean, it's obviously a very confusing and difficult decision or discovery. I'm not even sure how to phrase it. When you go through your life with certain thoughts like, this isn't right, I don't know but have you, in your limited experience, because this is still fresh to you, is it not?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I've only a year and a half maybe started transitioning.
Yeah. So have you noticed anything like that in your limited experience? Like, if I don't know if you've gone on online support groups or reached out or found, but that younger seems militant and I hate to say this, but almost angry, and older maybe just more mellow, like, okay, I'm coming to terms with who I am and let's make the change, because that has been my limited experience.
See, it's hard for me to say that because I don't really know many transgender like you. I mean, you don't really run into very many unless you're, I never hung out with many transgenders. The way I would see that, though, is the older ones, especially like myself, when you come out when you're older. I mean, we grew up in a very transphobic time and very homophobic time.
Yeah.
For us to come out, I guess it's really more empowering, I guess, for lack of a better word.
That's a fine word, I would think.
It's something that you've always wanted to do. So that's, now that you have the opportunity to do it, you're going to do it. Whereas if you're younger, you feel like you might have to prove something to people.
Yeah.
One thing I will say, though, is when I was telling my kids that I was going to transition is, and I told them, I said, if you don't want me to, I completely understand and I won't do it. And both my kids are like, Dad, we don't care. And nobody cares about that anymore. And I just that gave me a lot of
a boost.
Yes.
Yeah, what an interesting, that's fascinating. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but I think Barrett can relate to that too, because that's the power of parenthood. The fact that you would sacrifice who you are for your children, like something that is so, I would guess, powerful inside of you, something that you yearn and long to do. In fact, you said empowering. Would liberating be an appropriate word as well?
Yeah.
Yes. But that you would forego that at the request of your children just out of love. That's fascinating. And I'm glad that it didn't have to come to that they, said, no, Dad, this isn't about us. You do you. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I was just agreeing with you.
Well, then now let's start to work backwards. From from everything I know about the LGBTQ community and trans community is that this is something you just know at birth. Kind of like I didn't know I was straight as a little kid. I just knew that when I saw Pamela Sue Martin as Nancy Drew, it made my pee-pee tingle. That's literally it. So you obviously felt, and I confused, but I don't mean confused as, in a negative way. I just mean as, well,
Right.
people call me this, but I feel this. At what age do you remember that starting for you, where you felt mislabeled or incorrect? And well, we'll start there and then we can just keep asking questions, because I don't want to pile question upon question.
Right. I don't know if I'd say mislabeled is right. I just, by the time I was 7 or 8, I knew I wanted to be a girl. I knew, like, I don't mean like when you're a little kid, like you want to be a cop or a baseball player when you get old.
Right.
I knew I wanted to be a girl. And
well, can I interrupt? I apologize.
Sure.
I find that phrasing interesting. You knew you wanted to be a little girl, whereas some languages or some responses are, I knew I was a girl. Is that okay? But I'm just saying, is it kissing cousins, or is it just, or because we weren't as, I'll use the word advanced back then, that would be the language you use, like, I want to be a little girl, whereas today the language would be, are you born in the correct body? Okay, sorry, I'm just figuring this out for myself.
And I'm bisexual. I'm attracted to girls too, so it was very easy for me to just kind of brush that aside a little bit and just be like, well, I'm not a little girl. And,
and to be fair, women can be very hot, so it's very easy to be attracted to them.
Yes. I have a wife.
Right.
How did your wife respond to all of this?
My wife was incredibly supportive.
I was just going to make a joke, not really. Well, his wife is progressive as fuck. She probably sort of embraced it, like, oh, yay.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but
right. Sorry, I couldn't help knowing that's. I know Camryn is through his wife. We went to high school together.
Yeah. She was pretty all right with it right away. It kind of came up kind of weird because I was a cross dresser and I just kind of hid it from her for like forever. And when I told her about it, she was okay with it. And one time we were talking about it and I said, shit, if it was up to me, I said, I'd be transgender. And she was like, really? And we kind of talked about it a little bit, and then we didn't mention it again. Whatever, just whatever. She just let me, wear makeup or whatever, do whatever I wanted with that. Then like a month later, she was like, "Well, if you're serious about wanting to transition," she's like, "I will completely support you in that." And I was like, "Are you serious?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, if you change your mind, just let me know." And she never changed her mind. She's always been very supportive of it. So, I mean, I had the opportunity to do it, and
yeah,
I how can I say no to that?
No, not if it's something that you've thought about since you were 7 years old. I mean, that is, how do I put this? I don't want to say time served, but it's like, it's not a snap decision. This is something obviously that's weighed on you. And so I guess a question that just popped into my head, you said you were 1.5 years in. Do you have a timeline? Or is this just sort of a play as you go, just sort of, this is how I feel now, I'm comfortable, and then we'll take the next step? Or how is that working for you?
Well, I've been on hormones for a little over 1 year, and it takes about 3 years, they say, before you're fully, I don't know what exactly the terminology is there, but before that's as much as you're going to change from hormones. And other than that, I mean, you have to get more comfortable being in the world as a woman, and that's something you have to do on your own. There's no real timeline to that. That's just something you have to do on your own. But like as far as like my personal timeline, I mean, like I have so some like laser hair removal stuff I want done at a certain milestones and things like that. And just I guess it's all personal.
I guess that's what I meant, is just personal timelines. Like, you obviously don't have to share anything you don't feel comfortable with. I just meant very generally, like, in another year, I have an idea of where I want to be in 2 years. That's just sort of a general sense.
Yeah. And that's kind of a sliding scale, I mean, it all takes a little bit of time, I mean, with the laser hair removal and electrolysis and all the surgeries and all that, I mean, that it all takes time, it all takes money, it all takes effort. So I mean, in a year I'd like to be a little closer, and in 3 years I'd like to be, in 5 years I want to be completely transitioned. And I don't know if that means surgery or not. I don't know. But
Well, how has your life changed since you've transitioned, particularly with the hormones and things like that? Have you noticed, what kind of things have you noticed, and have you become more comfortable saying and expressing certain things now that you've transitioned?
Oh, absolutely. The biggest thing with hormones, with estrogen, is emotions. Oh my God, your emotions are they're like through an amplifier. That's like the only way I could really describe it. I mean, like, I've never felt happy like this or sad like this, or, at least often in my life. Now it's like I can start crying at a drop of a hat, if I really wanted to. The emotions are just crazy. And I mean, the physical changes they're pretty insane too. I mean, just like the softer skin, the breast growth, and like hair. I mean, I've regrown hair. I mean, like, I've never had hair this thick.
So wait, you're saying in a way that it could be a cure for baldness, just change your gender.
I do take minoxidil and throat shit, but I hope.
That's funny when Barrett asked that. It's not like I'm trying to squash, but it's like I had a comment that my first response to everything is a joke, like everything, because it's just the way my brain works. I'm not trying to be funny but I think about today's society. And when Barrett said, what changes have you noticed? My first thought was, and do you start liking Nicholas Sparks books? Things like that. And it's funny that I think that it's an offhand, stupid comment, but I'm sure there's somewhere that would take it the wrong way and get huffy and offended and be like, oh, are you saying that? And it's like, I'm just making a stupid comment, literally. And that's one thing, that might be the only thing I find, I guess, frustrating, is that as a comedian, I think all people should be treated equally. And I mean that in the sense of everyone is available as I don't want to say a target, but to be made fun of, not
everybody's
belittled.
Fair game.
Yeah, fair game. Not belittled, not attacked, not diminished, but humor is everywhere. So when Barrett asked that, and I had that thought, Nicholas Sparks, I'm like, I'm going to let him answer, and then I'm going to discuss the joke that popped into my head. But that was literally my first thought, is just, bad romantic books. So it was really interesting to hear you talk about heightened emotions, because the first time my wife saw me cry was when Robin Williams died. And it was only for like 30 seconds, because I'm just like, I can't believe he's gone. And she's like, oh my God, you're not a robot. I love you now. I always thought you were a soulless bastard, but the difference between men and women is, it's not like I try not to cry, or that nope, not going to cry. It's just that I don't know that I always have the same emotions that, someone more in touch with their emotions might. So that was damned fascinating to me to hear you say that.
To be honest with you, I probably cried twice in the previous 10 years before I started taking hormones. The first week I took hormones, I bet you I cried almost every single day. I mean, it was just insane, the difference. And then you kind of learn how to balance it all out and deal with it.
Interesting. And when you say
Well,
balance it out, like, I'm gonna do this in a way that's, I'm not trying to make fun, but it's the first thing that popped in my head is like, he's like, it's okay, just take a deep breath. And you're like, I mean, or even internally, like you're just like, okay, hold it in, like learn to regulate, I suppose.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you like learn to, like, I don't know, I guess turn it off or down a notch or something. I don't know.
Or do you analyze it? Like, hey, okay, this is a commercial for, kittens. I don't need to cry at this, like that, or is that too far?
No, I wouldn't go that far. No.
Okay.
I mean, I find it interesting because one of my friends, now this is anecdotal, I suppose, but one of his friends is a doctor and she was having some issues. And so they recommended that she take some testosterone for whatever reason. And she did. And she called him up and she said, I don't know how you guys do this because all I'm thinking about is sex. She's like,
well, tell her to watch football because we think about that too.
Right. But but it's like a funny thing. She's like, I get it. Like, it's, you guys are different. Like, you're wired differently. and when you say now my emotions are on an amplifier, I'm like, right, you're a woman. and I don't mean that like in some insulting way, but
no.
Right. That, yes. Okay. That, and I'm like, but it's funny because you say, well, I took estrogen. And so now you actually are ultimately, in a weird way, physical proof of the fact that there's a difference. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm making sense, you know what I mean?
Oh, no, it's making perfect sense. I think that all the time, actually.
Right, in a way that, like, you have a real kind of understanding of what before was was more theoretical. You know what I mean? And now you're like, oh, I get it.
I mean, it's goddamn fascinating to think that you have now experienced both sides. And yeah, I mean, just what an interesting experience to say, obviously from spending a majority of your life thinking one way, and then suddenly like, whoa, through the matrix, took the red pill. I have no idea how to describe it. Blue pill. I don't know which is which, but yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's arguably to a degree, we are, I don't say slave, but we're kind of for lack of a better word, we're slave to our biology and our psychology simultaneously. And so for you, your psychology is telling you one thing, but your biology is telling you something else. And so they're at odds with each other. And now you've taken some hormones. And so now your biology and your psychology are more aligned with each other. Do you know what I mean? Which is really fascinating. That being said, I feel like it's one of those things where I know that it is not a thing, I suppose, but like, it would be really interesting if when men and women got into arguments, like if the marriage council would just go, okay, just for a week, we're gonna dose you with some estrogen. You're gonna drink this tea every day, so you understand what's going on for her, and you're gonna drink this tea every day, so you understand what's going on with him. And then at the end of the week, they both go, I see.
Yeah.
You guys are a slave to your ding-a-ling, and we're a slave to our emotions. I couldn't think of a word that sounded like ding-a-ling.
It's funny.
But you know what I mean? Like, I think that's like a thing that would be actually kind of helpful. Hearing you say that, because I'm like, oh, I bet if I went through that, I would have a better understanding, and I get into less arguments about stuff. Because when people talk about their feelings, I'm kind of like, okay, but do they have to be in charge all the time?
Exactly. I mean? Yes. But then conversely for women, I've tried. I am not tried. I've told my wife this, and she just doesn't get it, and I don't expect her to. No woman can understand how insanely stupid powerful an erection is. How it just makes men do the dumbest things, and how the instant that orgasm is done, we are a completely different person. You talk about guys that cheat,
Yep.
like not dick asshole guys that just cheat because they cheat, but guys that are like that actual feel guilt. Like the instant it's done, they're like, oh my God, what have I done? I have made a horrible mistake. Or I mean, the power that stupid little thing dangling between our legs has over us. And I know there are a million jokes about it, and movies make jokes about it, but I don't think women understand how true those jokes
No,
are,
no.
and how
I mean,
just
yeah.
just a slave to our physiology we are. I mean, I think
Mm-hmm.
Robin Williams said God gave man a blood and a penis and a brain, and only enough blood to run one at a time, and goddamned accurate.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, that's fascinating.
That's why I cried when he died, because he was
Yeah.
funny.
Yes, indeed. No, I mean it's interesting stuff. So it's interesting that you have multiple perspectives on this. So now, how have your like friends you've had? Oh, okay. Well, let me back up a little bit. When you say you were bisexual, were you out as bisexual
No.
for?
Oh no,
Okay.
I've never had a boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've never like, I've been attracted to guys of, kind
Well,
of
I
been
mean,
with guys, but
Brad Pitt, who's not attracted to him?
well, yeah, he's gorgeous.
So, how did your friends take it, or did you have anyone who had any adverse reaction to it at first, who came around afterwards, or did some people go, oh well, it's about time,
Hmm.
like
Most people, like nobody knew. My family didn't know, which actually kind of surprised me.
So what you're saying is that you would have made a really good undercover shopper.
Oh my God. Yep.
Because you keep a secret. Like you could have been a CIA agent, for fuck's sake. Deep undercover,
Yep.
hiding it from your family. Fuck, what couldn't you get away with?
Right.
I'm sorry, continue.
But yeah, I mean, when I told them, they were just like, really? And they didn't have any idea. And they were fine with it. Everybody in my family's all been very supportive. And, I was actually worried about telling some parts of my family. And it turned out they've been super supportive. It hasn't been an issue. Hasn't been an issue with any of my friends.
Well, let me interrupt for a second, because I
Mhm.
know, not trying to push you into an answer, but I know that at least publicly you've expanded reasonably at a pace. Like you didn't just make a Facebook announcement. But you said, here I'm doing a staggered announcement. If I remember correctly, you went into Facebook settings and said a certain number of people can see this status. If you can see this, it means I trust you. And you explained what was going on. So how did you layer your press release, and where is it at now? And I mean, outside of the family that's been supportive, I guess what Barrett asked, have you run into any resistance, or is 2021 actually turning out to be not so bad finally for people that are different?
It was not, I haven't had any issue at all telling anybody. I mean, I was
nice. Good for you. Good on America. Good on the public.
Right. I told last year, right before New Year's, I told him, my office at work, I told him, our superintendent, when I was going to pick up my check, I said, because it was right before New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. I said, well, just so you know, I want to keep all the crazy inside of 2020. And so I'm like, just so you know, I'm
That's a good line.
I'm transitioning right now. And he's like, okay. And I left and went to go cash my check. And some other guy in our office, our safety director, gave me a call and talked to me a little bit, or texted me. And he's like, yeah, don't put up with any crap from anybody. If there's anything we can do, just let us know. And everybody's been great at my job about it. All the people that know.
Right. What do you
Except
do?
they did make you the receptionist. So
it's funny though. This receptionist has been really cool with me ever since.
Oh, really? One of us now, sister.
Well, now Do you have a conservative branch to your family?
Yeah, I do. My dad's side of the family is very conservative, and his wife, I told his wife, my dad died last October before I could tell him.
Hmm.
Sorry
But
to
I
hear
told
that.
his wife, you know, and right about the same time, right around shortly after Christmas, and she's been absolutely wonderful about it. Her kids are all pretty conservative, and they've all been very supportive, and yeah, and
No.
I mean, I shouldn't say my entire family knows because my aunts and uncles don't know, as far as
Well,
I
they
know.
do. They do now. They
They're good.
will
They're
on
all fans of this
days.
podcast. They're all
Right.
subscribers. You wouldn't believe our reach in
Um,
rural Wisconsin. It's insane.
well, I mean, I ask because like it's an interesting thing. We talked about this with one of the previous guests about how I hate this expression. God, I don't even know how to say this without sounding like a stupid like liberal millennial.
They are the worst.
God, they really are. See, that's the one thing I can say and not get canceled, right? It's not that it's any less true than any of the other stuff, but like, fuck me, man, Jesus. Um, one of the things I've noticed in traveling is that my impression of people is not what is actually going on. So, as a person who was previously identified as a male, as a man, right? When you walked around in the world, did you find that in your friend group, or even going back to when you were a kid, right? Like Nathan and I joke about this, like when we talk about how old we are, it's like, well, we're old enough to remember a time when people would say words all the time to each other and not mean them. But like I know that when I was around a bunch of white people and they would make a black joke and I would laugh, it wasn't because I actually thought it was funny. Is because I didn't think I had a right to say something because since it was funny, I couldn't acknowledge the fact that it actually hurt my feelings too, right? And when you look back in your past, one, do you find that like there are moments where people were making like gay jokes or transgender jokes or anything like that in which the joke might be legitimately funny, but it did hurt your feelings? Do you notice that? And in your personal life as a person who was once identified as a man who now identifies as a woman, do you, when you think about things like sexism and gender discrimination and things of that sort, as a person who used to identify as something differently, do you find your awareness of that to be like, do you have a different awareness of that, having been in a locker room with a bunch of men and know what locker room talk sounds like, and now being a woman, like we're like, so I'm not stating the question properly, but there's a question in there. I hope you can suss it out.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I
And
have.
you didn't sound like a stupid millennial asking it. So good job for working around that language by it was actually very insightful, I think.
I absolutely.
By the way, I like how the one who identifies as a woman is the one drinking the beer, whereas Barrett usually has tea, and I've got electrolyte water, and yet the feminine one is the one slamming a Dos Equis. So that's take that, gender norms.
That's right.
To Barrett's question, sorry.
I have noticed the sexism. I actually have noticed it a lot more. Part of that is because one of my friends on Facebook had asked a question about transgenders, and I had private messaged him, and letting him know that I was transitioning, and he gave me, he kind of like, well, he's like, well, do me a favor and just watch for this. And so that's one of the things he said is watch for the transphobia to turn to sexism. And so I've just kind of always watched for that. ever since he said that, and I actually notice it a lot more. Just
Can you expand on that? I don't what I guess I'm the transphobia turning to sexism. How you are treated or how you view the world?
Yeah,
okay.
Like, because he just assumed that people would be transphobic to me until, or show their transphobia towards me until they found out I was transitioning,
Right.
and then morph into sexism.
Gotcha. Okay.
I can't really say that's happened yet, but I have noticed sexism a lot more. I mean, it's just more I notice.
Now, do you think that that's partially because now that your emotions are heightened, you're more sensitive? See, it's like it's an interesting thing because it brings up the question of like, if it was something that you didn't notice before, or you noticed it before but it didn't bother you, but now you're taking hormones, and now these same things make you really upset. I mean, that's not right. Like, I guess in a certain way, it does support a patriarchal system in a sense that it was a system made by men, but not necessarily in a way that would say we did this to keep you down. There literally is a lack of understanding. Or do you find that the emotions that you have haven't changed because of the amount of estrogen you're taking, but just now that you have a different perspective, you understand that this is or is it a combination of both? Like, I'm curious.
I think it is a combination of both. I do. I think the estrogen kind of puts you in a little bit of a different frame of mind towards that, and because like you said, your emotions are a little bit higher, and I think it does put me more. I see it a little more. I'm a little more perceptive to it, and then maybe that's because I'm transitioning. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm looking for it. I really can't say, but I do notice it more. Absolutely. And there's some things that, some guy, I'll make some comment, and, 5 years ago, I wouldn't have thought anything of it. And now it's like, ooh, and now I notice it a little bit more. I don't know.
Maybe this is unrelated, but what you just made me think of is the actor John Bernthal, who played the Punisher and was in Wind River. I haven't seen the movie. I believe he said he was in Baby Driver with Kevin Spacey. And he said, he gave me an interview where he said that he looked up to Kevin Spacey his whole life. He's like, wow, he's such a good fucking actor. I can't believe I'm going to be in a film with him. And after all the shit went down, he said, if Kevin Spacey said to a woman the things he was saying to men, because Kevin Spacey gay and was what he was saying to young men, he said, I would have fucking punched him. He said he was acting completely sexually inappropriate. And if he had said that to a woman, that I would have punched him. So it's just, I'm not sure what you said that made me think of that, but just the idea of, I guess, awareness, the way his reaction was like, okay, it's a guy doing it to a guy, so I don't like it, but fine, whatever, it's inappropriate. But maybe the protection issue for how chivalrous men feel toward women, the opposite of sexism.
Yeah. I
guess I didn't leave that with a question. It was just a random brain fart.
I mean, is that just I don't want to say the if we're calling chivalry positive, is chivalry the positive side of sexism? Right.
It's like that joke where a guy just closes the door behind him, like, so you can open it yourself. I'm a feminist, like, instead of holding the door open for her.
Right. Like, because I know some women get offended if a man holds a door for them or does some things like that. But
don't they just have too much time on their hands?
And so next week we'll have a different co-host on the show.
I'm just making sure that at least once an episode I say something that gets me canceled, so that if I ever do make it, they don't have to go hunting. They don't have to go 10 years back into Twitter. They can just pull up the latest episode and then find the one thing that they can be outraged about and cancel me.
or they can find all of them and make a loop of you.
I just, yeah, best of. Yeah, best of the asshole things I say.
Exactly. It'll be next on TYT. They're going to talk about Nathan. Um, I mean, it does bring up, it brings up several interesting questions, right? Like, well, let me ask you this. Are there things that you miss? Like, are there certain things that you miss that are advantages now as a woman that you miss when you identified as a man?
Oh,
I mean, yeah.
um, that's a really good question. I really don't know how to answer that. My sex drive. I do miss my sex drive. That's one thing that goes away with estrogen, with the pills is, but they make things for that now.
Yeah, they make other pills for that.
Yeah, they do have female Viagra, but so I think I did read a test that said it doesn't work as well as they wanted it to. But that's fascinating. Makes me think of something that's I don't want to say inappropriate that I shouldn't share, but I don't care. My wife and I were talking about sex drive, and I don't remember how it came, but just something like I was frisky and she wasn't, I think. And she said, "Oh, why don't you just watch some porn and jerk off?" I'm like, I do that, at least weekly just to get it out of my system. She goes, "You masturbate once a week?" I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Oh my God, what is wrong with you?" And like, she thought that was an absurdly high number. And I'm
Once a
like,
week, that's like you're slow.
I know. I'm like,
You're-
talk to me in my 20s, sweetie. If you do you think like, but it's just like she thought that was so absurdly high. She's like, "What is your sex drive if you need to release once a week or have an organ?" I'm like, "Normal." Like I just figured she's like, "Oh, okay, good." But the fact that she was so stunned that she thought it was such a high number, I'm like,
I mean, it is fascinating to see just the idea of what you're saying. Is you're saying that you have become, as you transition, you become more a slave to your feelings and emotions and less a slave to your genitalia.
Yeah.
Right? Like you still theoretically have a master, and your master's not necessarily nice. You know what I mean? But
I
it's
hear
a
what
different one. You know what I
it's
mean?
just
Which is
different.
interesting.
Because I'm stupid. I mean, is it just physiology? What I talked about earlier, when the blood forms in an erection, and it's fucking powerful, as I said. What is female arousal? And when it happens, is it as powerful? I'm not saying you have the genitalia. Like, I'm just asking questions now. Like,
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean,
I do that.
yeah, I'm just, it popped into my head because,
Well, but I think that it's the same thing, right? Like if as a dude, you know, you get an erection and you can't think straight, and dudes, you'll hear the stories. Like one of my friends tells me a story, like he's with some woman that he has no business being with. You know what I mean? And while he's having sex, he's like, "Oh my God, yeah, this is great. Yeah, I mean, it's cool that her place is a mess, and she's got like 6 kids from 7 dudes, and that's cool." And he's all this, and he's like, that's okay that she doesn't have any really money and her life isn't really together, and her all blah blah blah, all these things. It was, yeah, man, it's fine, it's fine. She's really there. And then he comes in, and he goes, "Wait, the fuck am I doing here? Who the what?" You know what I mean? And he jumps up in the horror, like, "What the hell have I been doing for the past 3.5 minutes? Jesus Christ!" You know what I mean?
wait,
Like,
wait, 3.5 minutes. Are there videos that can tell me how to do that?
exactly. Have that long? That's crazy.
Yeah. Is he like a marathon runner or something? What?
But
Damn.
like that's basically what happens sometimes when dudes
Oh,
are
I've
in
been
the
there a
control
million
of that.
times. I can tell
Right.
you,
But
I'm not going to name
having,
names. You know my history, and they're
yeah,
like, why do I keep going back to that well? Like the
yeah,
instant you're
right.
done, you're like, oops.
But like, is it the same? Do you find that like as a woman, you find yourself a slave to that same thing? Is there a kind of an emotional release that frees you from that control? Like as a man, right? Like once you ejaculate, you're like, "Oh, okay, get behind me, Satan. I got this." You know what I mean? Like it's no big deal. You know what I mean? You can
Oh,
get the devil out of you, right? But like for women, does that happen? Like when do you find that having an emotional release allows you to kind of gain control of yourself? Because it sounds like the same, like, I can't control myself thing that happens, you know?
But just on an emotional, not a physical
Right.
level. Really
Yeah,
quickly,
so-
just to piggyback off that. Sorry, Cam, to interrupt. I apologize, but I remember having the thought and trying to turn it into a joke before There's Something About Mary came out, where he said, "Oh, you get the baby batter out of the system before you go on a date. That way you're clear headed." My twist on that I always thought is jerk off before a date, because that way you really want to spend time with her, like you said. Because if once you're done, you're like, well, I don't want to hang out with her, and it's a horrible thing to say, kind of, but also it's like, it makes me realize, yeah, I love my wife and I want to be with my wife, because I still want to talk to her when it's over. I want to be in the same bed with her. Whereas, as you described your friend, there's no like, oh shit, what have I done moment. But that's what I thought of. But back to the question of being a slave to emotions as opposed to physiology. Apologies for interrupting.
I really can't say if there's anything like any type of like release, like emotional release. My wife would say I'm bitchier, So I mean,
No, you could say, this is what I've been dealing with for years. Get used to
yes. Yes. Well, now you know what it's like. Well, then let me ask a very personal question, and none of my business, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You said your wife and family have been very cool with it. As you continue the transitioning process, what do you think? Have you had conversations about what this will mean for your marriage when, the transformation is complete, or, 5, 7, 10 years down the road?
We have a bed. I don't know what it's going to mean. I think we're just kind of taking it as it comes.
Mm-hmm.
So far everything's been pretty good. I mean, there's been some bumps, which of course is going to be.
It's marriage.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But everything's, been fine, so far. I mean, I don't want to,
All right. Yeah. Like I said, none of my business, but it was just a legit thought. I mean, it's an interesting. I just made the comment, like any marriage, there are bumps in the road. This is just a very unique bump.
Oh yeah. Yeah, exactly. And she's been super supportive, super cool with it. And, she said she'll support me, and, and any bridges that we need to cross, we'll cross when we get there, So
now, what when you look at what goes on with the pronoun wars and bathroom wars and things like that,
yeah.
whether or not you want to give your opinion on that is up to you. But like, what advice do you have as a person who transitioned as a full-grown adult who'd been a married man with children and a life and a career and all these other things? What do you say to younger people who now want to come out? Like, what advice do you have? Like, do you wish you could have come out at 16?
Oh my God, yes. Oh my.
Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely. If I was born 20 years later, I have no doubt I've already been transitioned. I would have kept if I was born in 1993 instead of 1973. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I have a thought on bathrooms, and I've expressed this thought multiple times. When it comes to bathrooms, hey, corporations, shut the fuck up about it. Because when Target was getting all the flack for saying we're going to create transgendered bathrooms, I was on the road doing comedy, and I stopped at a Starbucks that I'd been at a million times. And I went walking in, and I went to where I knew the men's room was, and it actually caught my eye, and it paused, and it just said restroom. And I'm like, interesting. And I looked at the women's restroom, and it just said restroom. And I opened the door, and there was just a toilet in there. And they did it quietly, and they didn't make any announcements. They just said, now we have 2 bathrooms. And I'm like, that's how you fucking do it.
That's how you do it.
You don't put it out there like a press release, like, oh, we're all inclusive, because then you piss off one side or the other side. You just do it quietly, and you do it right. That's my thought on bathrooms, is you just make bathrooms. Or at my local grocery store right now, they remodeled a little while ago, and they created a wall of just private bathrooms where it's
Yeah.
3 ladies' rooms, 3 men's rooms, and then 3 maternity or family, they're called family restrooms, that where just go into one of those. It's not as big a deal as anyone made it out to be. It was all just stupid press on the part of everyone getting involved.
Yeah.
All right. So one final question, maybe, unless Barrett has one. How do we know that you're really transgender and you're not just pulling an Eddie Murphy on Saturday Night Live, putting on whiteface because you are trying to research the other side?
That's it. Or
white
Oh,
people dancing on the bus. That's because I can't remember what you said, Barrett, but something made me think of that about going undercover as a white person, that Cam would be going undercover as a woman just to see what it's like.
I mean, I don't know how Nathan feels about this, but I would love to have you back on like in another 6 or 8 months and just see how this goes for you as you transition more and more. Like, I'd be curious to see because, and it would be interesting to see in a sense because you could really be a real advocate for that, because there are a lot of people who are like, okay, if we want to tread dangerously close to cancellation material, and we talk about things like, again, whether you're for it or against it, hormones for 10-year-olds or 9-year-olds, right, who feel a certain way, right, versus things like that. Like whether you feel against or for that, you could actually be a real advocate for people, because the fact that you said like if you were born in 1993, you would have wanted to transition at 16 or something. Like you're like, oh my God, yes. Like it wasn't even a thought. It wasn't like, well, let me think about that for a minute. It was more like, oh my God, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that would be a really interesting thing, because I think there are a lot of people who say, why not wait until you're 18? Why not wait till you do this and things like that? And you might have a different perspective on that. Or maybe you would be like, well, yeah, you could wait till you're 18 to do this or not or whatever. But it might be a really interesting voice to have out there, to have the voice of a person who lived a life as a man, as ultimately a kind of a quiet bisexual man, right? A bisexual man with a secret, essentially.
I think the term is closeted, like
right.
You kept it to yourself, because if you didn't, it was not a good place. America was not a good place up until very recently for people to be transgender. I mean,
it was bad enough being gay in those
I was
days.
just going to make that same comment. It was, gay goes back just a couple of years. Transgender gay goes back like 5 years. And I'm still not a great place, but I'm saying the leaps and bounds that we have seen recently are leaps and bounds. I mean, it is a seismic change for gay and transgender and queer, the whole rainbow. It is a seismic change. You go back 10 years and it's not safe. It's still not completely safe today. So.
But here's something interesting though. I'll say this and then we'll sign off, I suppose. But
I do have, I thought of a selfish question, but go ahead.
All right. So I don't know how to say this because it's embarrassing, so I'll just say it.
And yet you wouldn't tell us what shitty TV shows you watched the other week.
No, I was about to say, I was watching Batwoman the other day.
Wow, I was trying to get what shitty TV you watched out of you the other week, and you wouldn't. And it's Batwoman.
No, wow. I mean, it's funny because like I was flipping through HBO. We have HBO Max, whatever, and I was like, let me just watch something while I eat some food. And I was like, Batwoman on CW. Oh boy, I bet it's terrible. Let me watch, And I watch it, and it's like, but it's thoroughly amusing. But what they have is, it got that same kind of stuff that I would refer to as all that white supremacist nonsense, right? But it has
Batwoman's black though.
I know, that's the funny thing. It is so heavy-handedly liberal that it is unbelievable.
It's agenda driven, not story driven or
literally
conflict.
Like, they're like, all the cops are beating up on black people and shooting this person. And I'm like, come on, that's not what it looks like. I'm like, cops actually have harassed me multiple times. It does not look like this though. This is just ridiculously heavy-handed. But it's still it's like the thing is that the supremacist nature of it is not racist. It's that's what when people talk about the difference between racism and white supremacy, right? There's a huge difference between those two things. But what I'm watching is I'm watching a lot of heavy-handed stuff around gender, around transgender, and around gay relationships, right? Like the way that it's almost like they use it like a club almost, and it is
It's
fascinating
not almost, and it's
because, but it
not
is because
interesting.
but it is ultimately no different than when I look back and I watch like old racist movies where they make the Chinese people look like gays. You know what I mean? And things like that.
Hey,
The
Mickey
black
Rooney may have won an
right,
Oscar, not for that
right,
role, but
and right, and black people are like, yes, balsa, and all. It's like, oh boy, that's a bit heavy-handed, don't you think? You know, but I have the same thoughts about this stuff. As a person who's transitioning, when you watch, not that you watch Batwoman,
not that you
but
should.
not that you should, but but I was like shocked. I was shocked because it made me think to myself, like, oh, the conservatives have a point. Like, this is really heavy handed. Like, it's not that I don't agree with all the things that they're saying, but I see that it looks like if as a person who's watched the shift in television, it looks to me like they're trying to brainwash a group of children with a different perspective now. But it's equally as heavy-handed and brainwashy as the previous system. It's just now they run the levers. They've got their hands on the controls versus somebody else, is what it looks like to me. And I'm a dyed-in-the-wool liberal. Do you find when you watch TV shows now you see that stuff? And when you do see it, does it make you feel like if you see a transgender superhero, regardless of how heavy-handed it is, are you secretly like, God damn right? Like it's about time. Because like, you know,
The
because
first
like
thing I thought of was the ambiguously gay duo, Gary and
right.
Ace. The ambiguously gay duo.
But you know what I mean? Like, because like when I was like a young kid, the first time, I'll be honest, when I first saw Living Color, I liked them because they were black and they played rock music, and I played rock music and I was black, and there was nobody else that did that.
And they
Then
were
I was
fucking
then
good.
Well, then I heard the songs. I was like, oh, I really like them. But
Yeah.
I'd kind of already given them a pass because I needed them. Like I needed a living color. Like I needed that thing in my life because there was a vacuum in this place where I could look up at MTV and see people playing rock music with instruments who looked like me and played shit that I liked. So even, and I'm not saying that Living Color was heavy handed because I don't think they were, but like, but if I was watching a TV show, like it's like a thing where like it's the argument about like affirmative action, right? I would give a bad black rock band a pass where I wouldn't give a white one a pass because I need the bad black one to be there because a bad one is better than no one, right? But then
Right.
it implies that somehow because of their race, they're allowed to pass through even if they're substandard, which is the truth because I need to visually be able to look up and say, yes, this is possible for me to do. So in a weird way, right? And then you get to the point where like, okay, well, this shit sucks. You guys suck. I don't care that you're black. You fucking suck. You
Which
don't get a
is
pass anymore.
what I
And
deal
that's
with in comedy
Yes.
all the time. Oh,
right.
wait, I'm not allowed to talk about that.
Right. But I mean, but there's a point in which black people will say, okay, we have enough representation. You guys suck. Get the fuck out of here. Or you
No, because if there
right.
was, then DJ Khaled wouldn't be a thing, or however you say his
Another
name, because he
one.
sucks and nobody calls him out. And
He
Kanye
makes the
sucks too, and
best
nobody calls him out.
music.
They both suck, and they are just represented. And
I don't
it took
know.
Kanye to like going to Trump to have the black community turn on him, not
Oh,
shitty album after shitty album.
I mean, but he started off good.
No,
But DJ Khaled, I'll say, I'll give this for Khaled. He works with the best people. He makes the best music.
yeah.
Man, it's hilarious. But like, so that being said, like, do you find that when you see these kinds of representations of transgender things on television and movies, even if it's heavy-handed, do you find that it brings you joy still, or do you find it to be like, where do you weigh in on
I'm
that?
going to sum it up Barrett's question, 10-minute question with one sentence.
Yeah.
Is Orange the New Black your favorite TV show?
Lord.
But I don't know. I like having the representation, but I completely understand. Like, I can't stand Caitlyn Jenner, even though at the time I needed Caitlyn Jenner to have. I don't know if I'd be doing this if there wasn't a Caitlyn Jenner.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, Caitlyn Jenner. You know, so I completely understand what you're saying there about that. As far as like, there's so many bad representations of transgender. You know, when you see them, you know, it's just like, ugh, you really didn't need to put one in. You know, you don't need to do it just to have one. You know,
Yeah.
or, you know, gay people, I'm sure, can say the same thing about, you know, shows. You know, you don't need to have a gay person in there just to be gay and, you know, over the top gay or whatever, you know. So I mean, there's,
But like if you take Will and Grace, right?
okay,
I know I don't watch the show a lot, but I've seen it a couple times. If you look at a show like that, there's Will, there's Grace, and then there's the guy whose name
Sean
is
Hayes.
Jack. Right, the really flamboyant guy. Was that him?
I've never seen it. I just know Sean
Okay,
Hayes is gay
right.
and he plays the gay character. I don't know if I've
And
never seen it.
and I mean, and
Although I do
wonder,
understand Deborah Messing's really annoying.
but I mean, I wonder, you know, like when you look at a show like that, it's like, right, there's real representation there that is important.
Yeah.
But the representation also somehow aligns with, like, sometimes do you find that it is like what people of color, since I speak for all of them, you know, those people, it's like black people for white people, right? Like it's like on TV, it's like black people in a way that white people like to envision them, not always black people for black people. And sometimes I think it's gay people for straight people. Like this is how gay straight people like to envision gay people. So let's put them in a way that makes the straight people feel like, oh, this is what the gays are like, right?
yeah.
But is that sometimes better than nothing? I guess is the question. Or is that misrepresentation worse than no representation?
Boy, that's a tough question. I personally, my opinion on it, I think some representation is better than none. There was a guy, God, I can't remember the name of the show I was watching, but he was dating a transgender, and it was a sitcom. And I was like, holy crap, he's actually dating it, you know, on a sitcom, and they're actually making it, you know, not a big deal and not a, you know, and I thought that was pretty cool. So, I mean, I think having that representation helps more than hurts.
Interesting. That's an interesting thing because, like, yeah, I go back and forth about it. I feel like it's one of those things that it does now, and then in 10 or 15 years, it will look biased. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Like
everything does in the rear view. That's the way it works. Is life is only stunned forward. But
I think at the time, like Rochester on Jack Benny was progressive to a degree. You know what I mean? Like, but now we look at it and go, that was kind of demeaning. But at the time, it might not have been. You know, like it's like an interesting thing. Like again, like learning to, like as you say, Nathan, like when you judge your past, judge it kindly. You know what I mean? Like judge your, because like things take the time they take, and they go through the transitions they go. Like things transition also. Like you said, you're going to take, you know, over 5 years from start to finish. You're ideally like, you know, maybe it's a 5-year thing. You'd like to have it all kind of wrapped up, like in about 5 years. And it's like, right, it'll take about you, the individual, 5 years. It might take a nation 15 to transition, right? Like it may, you know, like they might have to do a what do you call it, what do you call a press release, a slow drip press release, They might have to do it. Like maybe that's the same way it happens as a thing, right? You transition this part of the country where it's safe, transitions first, and then this next part of the country gets exposed a little bit at a time, and you slowly transition a country, just like you didn't wake up one day and go start jamming yourself with shots and get an accent. You know what I mean? Like you're like, okay, I'll transition. So and it is a transition, not a immediate change, and that's an interesting thing that like I feel like to a degree we want the transitioning to not be a transition, want it to be an instant change.
Well, that's
And
how we want everything. We don't want to push in the clutch. We want to jam
grind
the gears.
Yeah, we just want to grind the gears up.
Grind the
Right,
gears.
but it's like maybe we need to really understand that like it is a transition for everyone, like in a way, you know what I mean? Like, that's like this has been really enlightening to me, just in a way, just in male-female relationships when you're talking about the difference with you pre-estrogen, post-estrogen.
Oh, yeah, the physiology has been amazing.
Right, like that's a fascinating awareness for me in how I deal with things. But just in terms of like when you're talking about the transitioning and really in my own way having to grapple with, is poor representation better than no representation, or is accurate representation the most important thing? And what does accurate representation actually mean? Right? Like, is that subjective? Right? Like, there's a lot of things that like having you here has given me an ability to see. Like, again, it kind of shows the humanity of other. I don't know if you've had a similar experience, Nathan, but it's like, it shows that like if you get to the core of all things, it really does come about identity and how people see you and how you see yourself, and the juxtaposition of how you see yourself versus how you want to be seen versus how other people see you versus how you think other people see you. And then not making those verses, but making them a collective of yous that somehow get together and have the same, have kind of unanimity. Is that a word?
No, if it's not, it is now.
Right.
Well, let me wrap it up.
Making sense,
It is. Let me use that. I said I had a selfish question, and I think you led into it quite nicely with what you just said. And I guess that question would be, unless I am mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, you reached out to me on the side fairly early on in this process. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what, I guess, made you do that? What did you see in me that made you go, I'm going to suss him out and see what Nathan has to say? Because I don't think I ever asked that. And I was honored and humbled. Like, wow, you saw something and that I don't see in myself sometimes, like empathy or emotional intelligence, things I probably don't really have. But what informed that decision? Or were you just drunk on Dos Equis?
Well, I don't know.
Bottle of scotch and a dartboard?
Yeah, why not? Hit the random on the friends and be like, yeah, they could probably help. No, I honestly, I know you're pretty liberal, and I know you have a pretty wide circle of friends or contacts anyway.
I mean, as you can see, I know a black.
I'll tell you this, he's had his two other black friends on too. I was like, my God, I'm not the only one. 3, right? I felt like I had that Highlander moment where I was like, oh man, some of these cats gonna have to go. Like, I'm gonna have to cut some of the heads off these guys. Like,
how do you think my gays feel when, especially one of them, when I bring another one on board? Like, wait a second, how many gay friends do you have?
Right.
I'm not telling.
There can be only one. Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah. Well, thanks for coming and hanging out with us.
Oh yeah, no problem.
And I agree with Barrett. Let's do this again in the better part of a year, the early side, the under 12 month side of a year. See where you're at, and I don't want to say a homework assignment, but I didn't want to discuss it this time because I'm not. But I just started reading. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Abigail Schreier's book, Irreversible Damage. Look it up. I guess controversial is the word, because the right loves it, the left hates it, and I'm finding it interesting. And I know someone dealing with something being discussed in the book. It involves, I don't know, but irreversible damage by Abigail Schreier. I would say both read it, listen to it on up, and let's discuss that in a few months.
It sounds great. I'd love to.
Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks
very
for
nice.
bearing your soul and informing us. As I agree with Barrett, I feel I feel better informed, and I wasn't, I knew I was ignorant before, but it's just fascinating. Just thank you for sharing your story.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really, it's been interesting. It's been enlightening in a way that I had no preconceived notions about it, but I'm like, oh, right, like these things make sense in a way that they did not before. So this is really cool. Really, thanks.
Yeah.
No problem.
All right, anybody
Yeah.
watching or listening, thanks for
All right.
watching or listening. Bye. Oh, hi. Barrett and I got so engrossed in the conversation that we forgot to do our usual sign-off, which is that all things Barrett can be found at antargoodwin.com. As I said, he's a musician. He's a musical director for the Katie Henry Band, which you can look up, katiehenrymusic.com. You can take bass lessons from Barrett if you wish, just as I said, antargoodwin.com. I can be found at nathantimmel.com. First thing you'll come across is my latest book, which it's called We Are 100, and the Midwest Book Review just called it a deftly written and simply riveting thriller of a read from first page to last. So, if you're into reading, you can pick up my book, We Are 100, on Amazon.com, and you can learn about me at nathantimmel.com.